Today we're going to be reassembling the upper end of the engine. This is the intake manifold. It came back from the machine shop. They cleaned it all up. I'll flip this over and show you some of the details. But this engine is pretty unique in that the cams are actually mounted in the intake manifold. The intake manifold is actually integral into the valve cover assembly. And that poses some unique challenges with the way we have to reassemble this. The rocker arms are placed and just rested on top of the cams. On top of the valves, and then we have to place this on without disturbing them and get it all bolted on and make sure that they are in the right places. So we'll see that. But for now, we have to put some cam seals in and the end caps. So the cams actually come out these end caps here. So we've got to install these thrush washers, the clips to hold the cams in, the cam end caps, and then the seals. So we're going to work on that today. Let me flip this over and show you. So this is the underside of the intake manifold / valve cover, and this is where the cams are. The only thing holding the cams in right now are the special tools, the locating pins for the intake and exhaust cams. This is what gives you your timing. So with these pins in place, this is properly timed for the service position. And if I pull these out, the cam will actually slide out the end. They're held in by those C-clips. So let's get started. I'll put my GoPro on my head so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, before we get started, I just want to show you, this is the main air intake where all the air and turbo boost comes through from the intake, and these are your intake tracks that feed the individual ports on the engine, and these are just air passages. Nothing else goes through here. The diesels are direct injected. These are the diesel injection ports here. So these are, there's no air and fuel mixture that goes through these, it's just air. And this was completely gummed up with a combination of positive crankcase ventilation fumes, debris, and exhaust gas recirculation. They form this really sticky goo which clogs eventually this intake track. So the machine shop did a good job cleaning all this out. So just wanted to point that out before we get started. So in terms of the cam seals, we'll start with that. So here is where the thrush washers go, like this, to hold the cams in place, and then the C-clips. So I'm just going to blow out any debris that's in here. Same deal. I've already got this clean. I dip it in some oil. Doesn't matter which way these go. They're both symmetrical. They're also both the same left and right, or intake and exhaust, I should say. That's that. Clip, oil. I bought new clips. I didn't trust the old ones. Came out. They were kind of misshaped when I pulled them off. I don't know if I did that or it's just time or heat that does it. But I got new ones of those, and of course new seals, which will go in next. There we go. There's that satisfying click again. Beautiful. Just double check this one. I'm looking for that gap between those two, the C-clip opening, and we're good, and I can rotate that around without binding. Let's double check this guy. I'm pulling out the service tool for the intake cam, and yep, nice and free. Very nice. Good. Okay. You know, normally when you replace the lifters and the rockers, you would replace the cams, but I had to draw the line somewhere. The cam, it looks okay, and you know, there's a budget here, so I left the cams in place, but obviously had to replace the lifters and the rockers. Actually, they're technically not lifters. They don't do lifting. They're valve lash adjusters, or hydraulic valve lash adjusters, and we'll see that in a second. Okay, now we're going to work on the seals. Alright, get ready to put these seals in. This is one of my least favorite things to do. I always get nervous when I do these. I don't know if they're going to get tore up by the flanges or the cam, or if they're going to seat properly, or if they're going to pop out. I never really get a warm fuzzy for how much effort to use to push them on. But in this case, I've covered the end of the camshaft with some blue electrical tape because it's got a fairly sharp edge on it, and I don't want it to cut into the new seal. And then I'm going to use my, I think it's a 32mm socket here, yeah, which is the closest one I have. I prefer slightly larger, but the next one I have is like a 36, and it doesn't fit in the recess here. So we're going to try this. Again, one of my least favorite jobs, but I have to be fairly precise, so I'm not wearing gloves, which I normally do. Again, I'm going to coat everything in oil so that everything slips in place. Try and get it very nicely over the cam. Yep, that was good. And then we'll start tapping here. Again, I'm always nervous when I do these. Okay, that seems to have bottomed out. It seems like it's nicely recessed. I'm going to pull the service tool out again and rotate and see if we have any binding. Nope. I think we're good. That went fairly well. Let's get the other one done. By the way, I really like these service tools. So the first set I bought was from eBay, and they don't work well at all. They just don't fit right. These came from ID Parts, and they fit really well, much better than the eBay ones. All right, same thing. This is the end cap. Goes in here. No C-clips or anything, and no thrush washers. Just an interesting point to note here, this little tab on the back of this exhaust cam, that's what excites the Hall effect sensor for the cam position, which is right here on the other side. You can see the tip of it here. The intake cam has that nub also, but there's no sensor on the intake cam. So I'm gonna, whoops, don't need that light anymore. Dunk the cap, get her lubricated. And we'll start her by hand. Oh, look at that. Actually, that goes in almost all the way by hand. Just gonna get her a heavy tap. Looks good. All right. Next up, we're going to trial fit this on the engine. Make sure I made some locating dowel pins that this will slide down onto, and I'm not sure I have the clearance to use those, so I'm going to check that, and then we'll get this puppy installed. All right, these are the some people call them hydraulic lifters, some people call them hydraulic lash adjusters. Basically, the cam lobe rides on this, which is needle bearings inside there, and then this is what the valve stem sits on. I'm sorry, the cam's up here. Cam rotates on this. Cam pushes this whole assembly down. This pushes the valve open, and this takes up any gap. These are spring loaded. They're also, when the oil system's pressurized, they get oil in them to resist that spring. The question I asked on the forum, and thanks Jim for the answer, these do not need to be pumped up or pre-oiled or primed. They go in just like this, and then as soon as the engine oil pressure comes up, these fill up and take over. So we're going to install all these. I am going to dip them in oil just to get some oil in the needle bearings so they're not dry for the first few seconds, and then we'll install them in the head. I came across one that's the lash adjuster is not assembled from the shipper with the rocker assembly. Also, I wanted to point out this is the sacrificial rocker arm. So if you have a timing belt break or a timing belt slip like we had in this case, this rocker arm is designed to break, and when the piston comes up and hits the valve, this will crack right here, as opposed to any damage to the piston or the valve. So that's pretty unique on these diesels. And then to assemble these, there's a little clip here. You just clip it in place, and she hangs like that. All right, we got our new gasket on, and I got one dry rocker arm assembly here, and I got one soaking in the oil, so we're gonna fish the oil one out, and we're gonna put this and they just stay there until the cylinder cover goes on, and we hope that they don't knock them off. So I've got these posts here that I made to line everything up. So hopefully that'll help us get this down without knocking these rockers out of here. Just making sure they slide up and down in the bores properly. Alright, I'm going to do the rest of them. Be right back. Alright, we are ready to put this cylinder cover slash cam shaft slash intake manifold assembly back on. Got my alignment pins here. All the rockers are in place. Notice if I knock them off, they're going to do this, and that's not good. We want to make sure this goes down nice and steady and nice and even, and it clamps down on all these guys because the camshaft lobe has to align with all of these, and it's very easy to just to knock them out of place, and then we got to pull it back off. And unfortunately, we don't really know that until we start start turning the motor around with the timing belt in place. So yeah, and I'm losing the daylight again here. So let's see what we can get done. There's also a pretty unique. So of course, one of these valves or more are going to be partially open when you bolt this thing down. So there's a procedure on how to do that. So you got to bolt down specific bolts first to get those cams to open the springs on the valves on some of these, and you'll see when we put this, when we slide the assembly down, there's going to be a bit of a gap because the springs are pushing up on those cam lobes, and we got to get that all sorted. So I'm going to go grab that assembly and muscle this in place. I'll be back. All right, I think that's on. Let's double check everything. So you can see, because the cam lobes are hitting some of those valves, we have to start putting the bolts in and start tightening them down. So we'll get that done here. So the procedure says to alternate between bolt 11 and bolt 16 to get this head seated before we start the torque sequence. Really wish there was a way to verify that these rockers haven't fallen off. I guess since this is going down evenly, it's okay. I'm going to probably turn these cams around and make sure we can feel each valve opening and closing before we go too much further. Yeah, all right, it's down. Looks pretty good. Okay, now we're going to torque down this cylinder cover. The torque spec is 7 Newton meters straight down the center, and then up the left, and then back down the right side, and then we go up to 25 Newton meters. So we'll start at 7. This is that cam position sensor I mentioned the other day, and then this is our boost pressure sensor. I'll replace both of those just for reliability standpoint. Okay, so now that we've gone up the center, we're going to move over to the left. Okay, now we go up, do the same thing with 25 Newton meters. All right, now that the cylinder cover is torqued down, I'm actually going to pull the service tool out and rotate this cam around to see if I've got all those rockers and lash adjusters in place, because if I knocked any one of them off, we're going to have binding here. So I'm going to remove this service tool I'm going to rotate this. We should be able to feel all the valves springs, the resistance from the valve springs. Yep. Alright, that feels pretty good. There we go. There she is. Okay. Now, I'm going to try the same thing on the exhaust side. So the spring tension on those valves is keeping this tool in place. So it's going to want to snap over. Yep, here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So it seems like we got all of our rockers in place. That's good. Okay, they're both back aligned. Alright, now I'm going to put the injectors in. I'll probably wait till tomorrow. It's getting really dark out here.